In the entire galaxy, war is fought in a very standardized way. In fact, every war will be fought in 9 distinct phases in which only the first 5 are relevant to this little story of mine. In the first phase, there is no war. Here exists a mere dispute about something. This could be a border dispute, a trade dispute, or you don't like them. It could be anything, really. It could, depending on your standing in your respective society and the power the standing gives you, just being a fellow diplomat looking slightly funny at you. War is inherently stupid and silly. Therefore, the reasons they are fought are as such. But the most common reasons are they have something you want, or they have something you don't want to exist. For us, it was the latter. In the second phase of the war, there exists a conflict of some sort, but no diplomatic conversation yet. Humans would describe it as being butthurt. Basically, you are stewing, either as a nation or as a sufficiently powerful individual, in your wants and needs from the enemy, and will show it openly. Maybe through, I'm applying the powerful diplomat analogy here, voting always against the specific diplomat out of principle, ignoring him, making snarky remarks, or even show full-on non-violent hostility. In the third phase of the war, there is, usually instigated by the other party, a diplomatic discussion to resolve the issue in a non-violent way, through an apology or through admissions from the other party involved. In rare cases, you're even here hell-bent to go to war and won't accept any admissions, apologies, or anything other. Pride is a massive factor in this phase, and can lead you to believe you have to prove a point. Those are the 3 pre-phases of a full-scale war. No fighting has happened yet, and the war could easily be prevented up until this point. But let's say this has failed. So, what is next? But first, my particular case up to this point. In our case, as the Naraxi, we didn't like how our new neighbor was expanding into our territory and settling planets we couldn't inhabit, for which they were paying handsomely and single-handedly boosting our economy nearly 5-fold, as well as prevent a major collapse of our banking system, which the humans called a Great Depression. But still pennies in comparison to what they were earning from those planets. The rough estimates of our bankers were that the humans paid us barely 5% of the earnings of those planets, if they were to install industry on them. The minerals in the crusts alone would be worth 10 times more what they were paying us for the right to settle and develop those planets. How dare these barely spaceflight-capable humans? We thought of them as utter cheapskates, and portray them in our media as such. Greedy liars that would get your offspring for a penny if you are not careful. Well, to be fair here, our estimates were off by quite a bit, and we didn't account for all of the planets they only settled and did not develop. A prime example of one of those planets would be the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which they turned into a massive memorial for all of their fallen soldiers, which couldn't be brought back for a proper burial. A concept so foreign that we thought of it as either a military installation or a tourist attraction. We were certain that this place made money somehow. So, as the diplomatic talks were starting, we would not settle for anything less than the utterly beautiful but deadly oxygenated green marble, which was the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. For humans, it was a paradise beyond comprehension. The largest earthquake would not exceed a 1.5. The highest storm wouldn't even count as one on their world, and the most active volcano wasn't due for an eruption for at least another 300 of their years, and even if it would prematurely explode, it would literally be a cakewalk for them to contain the explosion and flowing lava with their shields. The part that made it so deadly for Nazali was the atmosphere and gravity. With an oxygen level of 20.9 and gravity of 9.8 meters per second squared, the planet would either poison us with the extreme oxygen levels or crush us into the ground. Grot, our home planet, has an oxygen level of 5.1% and 3.2 meters per second squared of gravity is equally deadly for a human, if only because they cannot breathe unaugmented, and our carry gas is argon instead of nitrogen, which explains the level of oxygen on our world, as it displaces oxygen. So we demanded, yes, demanded, on top of the 90 trillion creds a year, that they would either hand over all of the resources of the tomb, including equipment and manpower, so we would make the money, or they would increase their pay by our estimate of the income of the planet, which at the time was calculated to be at 650 trillion creds a year. It was only at the end of the war that we learned the planet was run by a non-profit organization called the Intergalactic Red Cross, and was making no money at all over their running costs due to it being almost entirely staffed by unpaid volunteers and various also unpaid charities. Let's just say this pissed the human diplomat off to the point of ripping the armrests off of my guest chair in the office, in an attempt to prevent himself from attacking me. We didn't come to a conclusion, which led to the fourth phase of any war, the official declaration of war. The by far shortest phase of any war, especially for us, because we predicted their behaviour, and I had the declaration ready and just gave it to the human in response to ruining my chair. It was a beautiful chair. So, the fifth phase of the war, which incidentally gave this chapter its name. The warring factions will build up their armies and prepare to go to the fight. Usually this is the longest phase because it takes time to conscript and train an entire army. Note the fact that the standing army of all the species usually only consists of a skeleton crew manning the bases, spacefaring vehicles and installations, as well as special forces and a sufficiently large amount of anti-piracy units. That was where we learned the human term professional military. Of course, it also took them time to gather their troops, but where we usually take up to 3 years before the first fight occurs, reasoning mentioned above, they attacked us in less than a week. In less than a week they swiped across our space, and the very same ambassador I handed the declaration of war towards literally walks 5 days later, flanked by a platoon of soldiers, into my palace and demanded unconditional surrender. This war, or the war over the tomb of the unknown soldier, is still the shortest war in the history of the Galactic Council, at the day of writing this, with 4 days, 16 hours and 32 minutes, 2 days of which the humans were travelling to Grot and defeating the planetary defence. And for anyone wondering, the remaining phases of a standard war, before the humans completely shattered that process, are as follows. 6th phase, preparing and agreeing of a meeting place of the two armies. 7th phase, fighting begins. 8th phase, surrendering of one faction. 9th phase, aftermath and reparations. Excerpt from Memoirs of the Last King of the Naxali, written by High Imperator, founder of the universe, favourite of the gods, ruler of everything above and below, voice of the people and righteous heir of godhood. His Majesty, Ismail Nuzul Lumiere.